Okay, speak with Shane, please.
But you don't.
Sick and tired of you guys. The last guy that came here, you did the same thing. Get the hell out of here. Get the hell out of here.
A violent outburst by a congressional candidate caught on a cell phone recording. Now a Montana Republican is under fire nationally ahead of today's special election.
Right now, President Trump beginning another day of diplomacy abroad. Today, he's meeting with NATO leaders he criticized as a candidate but embraced in the Oval Office. We are live in Brussels.
And Republicans trying to defend the House-passed health care plan despite a rough new outlook from the Congressional Budget Office. I'll tell you who could get hit the hardest. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Early Start. I'm Dave Briggs.
Good morning. I'm Allison Cossack. It's Thursday, May the 25th. It's 4 a.m. in the East, and a special election in Montana today. Now in a white-hot national spotlight after that crazy audio came out seeming to show the Republican candidate for the state's one House seat body slamming a reporter. Yes, you heard right. Greg Gianforte charged overnight with a misdemeanor assault by the county sheriff. You can't make this stuff up. The alleged attack took place at Gianforte headquarters in Bozeman.
So far, the candidate has held off taking a stance on the Republican health care bill, waiting for the Congressional Budget Office to weigh in on its effects. Guardian reporter Ben Jacobs tried to press Gianforte for his stance now that the CBO has released its score. Listen to what happened next.
Into the CBO score, because you know you were waiting to make your decision about healthcare until you saw the bill and it just came out. And what you thought
we'll talk to you about that later.
Yeah, but there's not going to be time. I'm just curious if you have
Okay, speak
right
with
now.
Shane, please.
But you don't.
Sick and tired of you guys. The last guy that came here, you did the same thing. Get the hell out of here. Get the hell out of here. The last guy did the same thing. You were the Guardian?
Yes, and you just broke my glasses.
The last guy did the same damn thing.
You just body slammed me and broke my glasses.
Get the hell out of here.
You'd like me to get the hell out of here, I'd also like to call the police. Can I get you guys' names?
Hey, you gotta leave.
He just body slammed me.
You gotta leave.
I don't even know what to say when politicians go wild. Gianforte himself hasn't said anything publicly since the incident, but a statement from his campaign says Jacobs entered Gianforte's office without permission, aggressively shoved a recorder in his face, and began asking badgering questions. The statement adds that Gianforte asked Jacobs to lower the recorder and that Jacobs declined, and it blames Jacobs for pushing them both to the ground.
But note, the recording has no indication that Jacobs was asked to lower the recorder. You can judge for yourself whether the health care questions were badgering. For his part, Ben Jacobs calls it the strangest moment in his entire life. With polls opening in just a few hours, the fallout for Gianforte has been swift. 3 of the state's biggest newspapers have rescinded their endorsements, and Democrats have already rolled out Facebook ads attacking Gianforte for the alleged body slam.
The Democratic candidate Rob Quist so far declining to comment on all this. One other thing worth noting here, the sheriff, Brian Goodkin, has confirmed he gave Gianforte's campaign $250. I'm thinking it's $250,000 maybe?
No, $250.
$250? Okay. But he says it will have no bearing on his investigation. Early voting has been underway for weeks, and hundreds of thousands of absentee ballots have already been returned. So there's really no telling how Wednesday's events will affect the election. But already you've got more than 250,000 votes already
That's
in.
Right, 259,000.
But the polls open. You've got all these newspapers yanking their endorsements, unprecedented there, and really bizarre events.
Well, look. He's got bigger problems. He's facing misdemeanor assault, punishable up to 6 months in jail.
Absolutely.
But your point is a good one. 259,000 of these 700,000 registered voters there in Montana. You expect about 500,000 in elections like this. So this election may already be over by all accounts. He may have already won. And let's not forget the honest truth is some voters in this environment with this rhetoric towards the media may actually like this. They may actually like to see him. But this is a big issue that is not going away for Mr. Gianforte. Meanwhile, today, the president's first foreign trip takes him to Brussels, where events are just now getting underway. The main focus of his day is NATO. As you know, candidate Trump once disparaged the military alliance as, quote, obsolete on the campaign trail. But since taking office, he reversed that stance after NATO made a few adjustments, saying it's no longer obsolete. although he still wants other countries to contribute more. White House correspondent Sarah Murray joining us live from Brussels this morning. Great to have you, Sarah. We saw the red carpet literally rolled out in Saudi Arabia and, of course, in Israel. What is the reception like from NATO leaders?
Well, look, today is going to be a day where a trip that was largely focused on pomp and circumstance turns more to substance. So President Trump will be beginning his day any minute now. That's with a meeting with European Union leaders. Later this afternoon, he's going to be having a working lunch with the newly minted French president, and then he will head here where I am for the NATO summit, as well as a working dinner with NATO leaders. And there are a number of pressing issues on the agenda. As you mentioned, he has previously called NATO obsolete. He has since revised that view, but advisors say he will still press other members of NATO to increase their defense spending. And you can bet there's going to be a robust discussion about terrorism and the threat of terrorist attacks in Europe in the wake of that Manchester attack. We also know that the UK government has been particularly piqued with the US government in recent days. They feel like leaks are coming out of the US government related to this investigation. Theresa May will be here today, so there may be a conversation with her and President Donald Trump regarding that. A couple other issues on the agenda. President Trump is still weighing whether to send thousands of troops to Afghanistan, so he will have an opportunity to talk to some of our allies here to get their input and to see if they would be willing to offer military support for that. And again, we just can't hammer home this intelligence issue enough. It's not just a question of what's going on with the investigation related to what happened in Manchester, but there also could be some allies who are eyeing President Trump pretty warily after he had that meeting in the Oval Office with Russian officials and shared highly classified information that came from some of our intelligence partners, in this case, partly from Israel. So you can sort of expect this to be the backdrop of what's going on today. And then later tonight, he hops on a plane again, headed to Sicily for the G7.
Where the Paris Climate Agreement takes center stage. Sarah Murray, thanks for coming on this morning. Appreciate it.
Okay, the House GOP health care bill would leave 23 million more Americans uninsured. That's according to a report by the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. The CBO predicts 51 million Americans won't have health coverage by 2026. Compare that to 28 million under Obamacare, with 14 million fewer enrolled in Medicaid. Americans losing health insurance creates ammunition for critics of the bill, and it's the main objection that's being raised by moderate Republicans. But conservatives like that it lowers both the deficit and premiums for many people. Average costs do go down after an initial spike, but the sickest Americans end up paying more. Prices also depend on where you live. You look under the bill, states can waive protections for pre-existing conditions. So what the analysis does here is it divides the market in three. So you see premiums fall 4% in states that don't lose protections and 20% lower in states with moderate changes. But here's the thing, that's because insurers cover fewer benefits, such as maternity care, vital, mental health, and substance abuse, super important. So that could cost customers thousands of dollars out of pocket. And for states that get rid of protections, premiums vary. They're all over the place. The CBO couldn't calculate exact increases there, but it did say they would be extremely high for the less healthy. Premiums also depend on age and income. Younger and richer Americans fare better than older or poorer people. The White House disputes the report, saying in a statement that the CBO is totally incapable of accurate predictions. Look, everybody pretty much agrees Obamacare isn't perfect. I mean, we just heard about one of the country's biggest insurers, Blue Cross Blue Shield, pulling out of Kansas City, Missouri, leaving that area with no insurer. This could happen next year if no one else, no white knight comes in. So clearly Obamacare is not perfect. But when you see half the country losing its benefits on what the House bill is, many question if that's the answer as well.
John Cornyn summed it up when he said the CBO score of the Senate bill is all that matters to him, because senators appear to be taking the stance of, thanks for the ride, fellas. We will take it from here. Not clear how much of this bill is taken up in the Senate.
And they're going to go ahead, the Senate's going to go ahead and rewrite it.
They may start from scratch. All right, new overnight, more raids and arrests in England following the terror attack in Manchester. Now the bomber's brother also under arrest. We are live in the UK. Up next on Early Stuff.
In the UK, new police raids and arrests overnight in connection with the Manchester terror attack. A total of 8 people now in custody. In addition, the brother of the suspected suicide bomber arrested in Libya. Police are targeting a terror network linked to the bomber in what they say is a fast-moving investigation. CNN's Erin McLaughlin is following all these developments. She's live for us in Manchester, England. Erin, tell us the latest on this investigation that really seems to be picking up steam.
That's right, Allison. Authorities describing this as a rapidly evolving investigation. Overnight, multiple raids in the Manchester area. One of the raids including a controlled explosion. Authorities didn't go into the reasons for that controlled explosion, but they did say that overnight they made 2 separate arrests, both men, bringing the number of arrests to 9. Overnight, though, as well, they released one woman who was brought in, arrested in connection with this attack. They released her without charge. A total of 8 remaining in custody as authorities are working furiously to unravel what they've described as a wider network they believe is responsible for this attack. The investigation across 2 separate countries, at least, the United Kingdom as well as Libya. In Libya, a local militia in Tripoli saying they've arrested the younger brother of the suspected bomber, 20 years old. They said he had links to ISIS. They also believe that he was planning a separate terrorist attack that, again, according to a local militia, it has not been corroborated by Libyan authorities. Meanwhile, back here in the United Kingdom, an uproar about leaks coming from the United States. The New York Times publishing photos, crime scene evidence, which included pieces of a backpack, batteries, as well as shrapnel believed to be from the bomb. UK authorities are incredibly angry at a number of leaks coming from the United States, and British media is reporting that Prime Minister Theresa May plans to confront U.S. President Donald Trump at the NATO summit today about these leaks. Meanwhile, we are learning more about the victims killed in this attack. Some 22 victims, many of those victims children, including 14-year-old Ellie McLeod. Some 64 victims have been treated by local area hospitals, some 20 in critical condition. Allison?
Our hearts certainly go out to those families, and those leaks really stunning when you see what's being published out there. All that evidence is what investigators are using to move along their case. All right, CNN's Erin McLaughlin live from Manchester. Thanks very much.
All right, let's bring in Paul Cruikshank, CNN terrorism analyst and co-author of Agent Storm, My Life Inside Al-Qaeda. He's in our London bureau for us this morning. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
Does it appear by indications that there is a wider network responsible for the terror attack in Manchester?
Every hour this investigation goes on, that is increasingly the conclusion of the investigating authorities here in the UK. They believe there was a wider network, that he was not acting alone. And what they are doing at the moment is trying to dismantle this network, understand the scope of the network, firstly by focusing on people who were suspected to be radical associates of Abedi, and then kind of looking in turn at the associates of the associates and trying to map out a radical network that was behind these attacks. There's an international dimension to this investigation. There's all sorts of uncorroborated information. We have to really insist that it's uncorroborated at this point, coming out of Libya from a militia, a Salafi fundamentalist militia in Tripoli, which has an axe to grind with ISIS. That Abedi's brother has confessed to he and his brother being members of ISIS. Well, the British are not confirming that at this point, that information. And they say that it's not clear right now whether there was any interface with any terrorist group overseas. So there are a lot of unknowns when it comes to this investigation right now.
Let me ask you this. Let's focus a little on Salman Abedi, the man, the suicide bomber in this terror attack. He spent 3 weeks in Libya before coming to the UK, days before the attack. Is the thinking that he was radicalized before he left the UK? What's the thinking here?
Oh yeah, I think that is quite well established right now. And in fact, as has been reported by multiple outlets here in the UK, 5 years ago, that there was a call made to an anti-terrorist hotline from some Muslim community members in Manchester concerned about the radical views of the attackers. So the signs point here to sort of long-standing radicalization. What is not clear is when he started plotting this attack. Was it before he went to Libya? That's certainly the timeline that's coming out from this Libyan militia based on their interrogation. But it's not clear at this point when the plotting started and with whom. But there have obviously been more than half a dozen arrests. That is all linked to dismantling this network that British authorities believe was behind the attack. It's not clear either who built this bomb. It appears to have been on the somewhat sophisticated end of the scale in terms of the images and analysis released by the New York Times. And Abedi was basically flunking out of university, had no technical chemistry background. It seems a leap to think that he could have built something like this. It's not completely impossible, though, because he could have got some training while over in Libya at some point. But I think the signs are pointing more towards a bomb maker separate from him, still at large.
Lastly, on these leaks, UK authorities are clearly frustrated, in their words, irritated about the leaks. On the United States side, how do they impact the investigation, and who are they alleging is behind these leaks?
Well, the British are clearly pointing fingers at the Americans.
The intel community, the FBI, the CIA, the administration, who exactly, and how does it impact the investigation?
Well, look, I mean, this is a lose-lose, first of all, for both the British and the Americans. This situation. There are reports now that there is a suspension of some of this information sharing between the UK and the United States when it comes to this investigation. And that's quite consequential because US intelligence capacity is absolutely crucial for the Brits in terms of understanding the nature of the threat stemming from this case, especially because of the international dimensions of the investigation. That clearly the British now pointing the finger towards the United States, saying that somebody in some agency is likely to leak this to the New York Times. But I've read and reread the New York Times story, and there's no mention of where this leak comes from. And it should be pointed out that American newspaper reporters also talk to officials in other countries. But clearly this causing a lot of heartache right now in the transatlantic relationship.
I guess that's what I was getting at. To your point, these New York Times and these reporters have sources throughout the UK as well. But we'll stay on this. And interesting news to stay abreast of, that the sharing between the two countries could be off. We'll check back with you, Paul Cruikshank. Thank you, sir.
All right, our internet rumors, a good reason for Congress to investigate the murder of a DNC staffer? One Republican says yes.
There's stuff circulating on the internet. My question is...
What's circulating on the internet? What's circulating on the internet that you think is worthy of a congressional investigation?
His answer next.
Welcome back to Early Start. Texas Republican Congressman Blake Farenthold adding fuel to the already debunked conspiracy theories surrounding the murder of former DNC staffer Seth Rich. Fox News retracted its report last week, falsely claiming evidence had been uncovered showing Rich was in contact with WikiLeaks before his death.
Farenthold telling CNN the media focus on the Trump-Russia connection is preventing other stuff from being investigated. The congressman raising questions about the hack of the DNC based on rumors swirling on the internet. Listen to this.
There's still some question as to whether the intrusion at the DNC server was an insider job or whether or not it was the Russians.
The insider job, what are you referring to here? Because I hope it's not this information that Fox News just refused to be reporting.
Well, again, there's stuff circulating on the internet. My question is, why haven't
what's
the federal
circulating on the internet? What's circulating on the internet that you think is worthy of a congressional investigation? Because the D.C. police are investigating this, and so far they haven't said there's any there.
Yet the D.C. police nor no federal investigator has ever had a look at the DNC computer. We're relying only on the report of somebody that the DNC contracted to examine their computer rather than having federal officials. To me, we need to let the feds look at it.
Stuff circulating on the internet.
Dangerous.
Washington, D.C. police ruled Seth Rich's death a homicide, saying he was killed during an attempted robbery.
All right, ahead of violent outburst by a congressional candidate hours ahead of a special election in Montana. Now he's facing charges. The whole thing was recorded. We'll play it for you next.
Okay, speak with Shane, please.
But you don't.
Sick and tired of you guys. The last guy that came here, you did the same thing. Get the hell out of here. Get the hell out of here.
Wow, big drama in a special election in Montana. A violent outburst that you heard there by the Republican candidate caught on a recording and facing charges hours before polls open.
President Trump embarking on another day of diplomacy on his foreign trip. Today, the focus is on NATO. Can he win over leaders from an alliance he took aim at during the campaign?
And a new congressional budget score doing little to ease concerns about the Republican-passed health bill, who gets hit the hardest, and how it impacts the future of health care. Welcome back and good morning to Early Start. I'm Allison Cossack.
I'm Dave Briggs. Thanks for joining us. The special election in Montana today is now a white-hot national spotlight after audio came out seeming to show the Republican candidate for the state's one House seat body slamming a reporter, Greg Gianforte, charged overnight with misdemeanor assault by the county sheriff. The alleged attack took place at Gianforte headquarters in Bozeman.
Now, so far, the candidate has held off taking a stance on the Republican health care bill, waiting for the Congressional Budget Office to weigh in on its effects. Guardian reporter Ben Jacobs, he tried to press Gianforte for his stance now that the CBO released its score. So I want you to listen to what happened.
Into the CBO score, because you know you were waiting to make your decision about healthcare until you saw the bill and it just came out. And what you
I
thought
will
about
talk to you about that later.
Yeah, but there's not going to be time. I'm just curious if you have
Okay,
the
speak
right
with
now.
Shane, please.
But you don't.
Sick and tired of you guys. The last guy that came here, you did the same thing. Get the hell out of here. Get the hell out of here. The last guy did the same thing. You were the Guardian?
Yes, and you just broke my glasses.
The last guy did the same damn thing.
You just body slammed me and broke my glasses.
Get the hell out of here.
If you'd like me to get the hot up, I'd also like to call the police. Can I get you guys' names?
Hey, you gotta leave.
He just body slammed me.
You gotta leave.
Gianforte himself hasn't said anything publicly since the incident, but a statement from his campaign says Jacobs entered Gianforte's office without permission, quote, aggressively shoved a recorder in his face and began asking badgering questions. The statement adds that Gianforte asked Jacobs to lower the recorder and that Jacobs declined, and it blames Jacobs for pushing them both to the ground.
But note here that the recording has no indication that Jacobs was asked to lower the recorder. With polls opening in just hours, the fallout for Gianforte has been swift. 3 of the state's biggest newspapers have rescinded their endorsements. And Democrats, they've already rolled out Facebook ads attacking Gianforte for the alleged body slam.
The Democratic candidate, Rob Quist, so far declining to comment. One other thing worth noting, the sheriff, Brian Gutkin, has confirmed he gave Gianforte's campaign $250, but says it will have no bearing on his investigation. Early voting has been underway for weeks, and hundreds of thousands of absentee ballots have already been returned. To be clear, more than 250,000 votes have already been cast in this election. You could expect anywhere between 350 and 500,000 total votes in this election, so it may already be over.
And some Republicans who were looking to vote for Gianforte, this may not even alter their stance. This may be something that
true. As for Gianforte's case, though, it's not helped by the fact that a Fox News reporter, Alicia Acuna, sat there, witnessed the whole thing, and confirmed the reporter's entire side of the incident and said there was no aggression on behalf of the reporter.
All right. Today, the president's first foreign trip takes him to Brussels, where events are just now getting underway. The main focus of his day is NATO. Candidate Trump once disparaged the military alliance as obsolete on the campaign trail.
Since taking office, he reversed that stance after NATO made a few adjustments, although he still wants other countries to contribute more. White House correspondent Sarah Murray joins us live from Brussels. Sarah, what's ahead for the president today?
Well, good morning. Today, President Trump moves from style to substance. He began his day meeting with leaders of the European Union. He's in that meeting now. Later on this afternoon, he'll have a working lunch with the newly minted French president. And then after that, he heads over here to the NATO summit, where there will be a number of pressing issues on the agenda. Now, of course, on the campaign trail, Trump called NATO obsolete. Since coming into the White House, he's since begun to walk that back. But his advisors still say he'll be pressing our allies to contribute more toward defense spending. Now, another issue that's going to be high on that agenda is this question of whether President Trump is going to be sending additional troops to Afghanistan. He'll be getting input from our allies on that, and whether NATO would be willing to contribute to that military effort. And he could face some sharp questions about whether adding a few more thousand troops on the ground there will really make a difference in this 16-year-long war. Now, this all comes against the backdrop of some allies who are a little bit wary of the U.S. right now. There is, of course, the incident where President Trump shared highly classified intelligence from our Israeli ally with Russian officials in the Oval Office. So there may be some questions about whether the U.S. is still a trustworthy intelligence partner. And to that end, we expect terrorism to be a huge topic of discussion here, especially in the wake of that Manchester attack. We've noticed over the last couple of days, UK officials are growing increasingly frustrated with the U.S. government because they see that leaks seem to be emerging related to this investigation with U.S. officials. Theresa May will be here today, as will President Trump, so we'll be looking for any sign that she might raise that issue with him in person. Back to you guys.
Indeed, Sarah Murray, live for us in Brussels, just past 10:30 there. Thank you, Sarah.
The House GOP health care bill would leave 23 million more Americans uninsured. That's according to a report by the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. The CBO predicts 51 million Americans won't have health coverage by 2026. Compare that to 28 million under Obamacare, with 14 million fewer enrolled in Medicaid. Americans losing health insurance creates a lot of ammunition for critics of the bill, and it's the main objection that's being raised by moderate Republicans. But conservatives like that it lowers both the deficit and premiums for many people. Average costs do go down after an initial spike, but the sickest Americans, they end up paying more. Prices also depend on where you live. Under the bill, states can waive protections for pre-existing conditions. The analysis winds up dividing the market in three. Premiums fall 4% in states that don't lose protections and 20% lower in states with moderate changes, but that's because insurers cover fewer benefits, such as maternity care, mental health, and substance abuse. So that could cost customers thousands of dollars out of pocket. And for states that get rid of protections, those premiums are very different everywhere. The CBO couldn't calculate exact increases, but it did say they would be extremely high for the less healthy. Premiums also depend on age and income. Younger and richer Americans fare better than older or poorer people. The White House disputes this report, saying in a statement that the CBO is, quote, totally incapable of accurate predictions. Look, they're obviously getting lots of criticism for good reason, many would say. Obamacare, on the other hand, it's not perfect either. We're just hearing that the biggest insurer in this country, Blue Cross Blue Shield, is pulling out of Kansas City, Missouri. Next year, that could leave 19,000 people in Missouri out with no option at all, no health care, so health care lost. So none of these is perfect, but at the same time, you're going to see this House bill go through a huge rewrite in the Senate.
Yeah, the Senate is essentially starting from scratch, it appears. So we'll stay
Good way to phrase it.
abreast of all that with this CBO score out. More raids and arrests, though, in England following the terror attack in Manchester. Now Manchester's mayor taking a dig at the U.S. over leaks on the investigation. We're live in the U.K. next on Early Start. In the UK, new police raids and arrests overnight in connection with the Manchester terror attack. A total of 8 people now in custody. In addition, the brother of the suspected suicide bomber arrested in Libya. Police are targeting a terror network linked to the bomber. CNN's Erin McLaughlin is following developments. She's live in Manchester, England. Good morning to you, Erin.
Good morning, Dave. That's right. Multiple raids in the Manchester area overnight, which included a controlled explosion by police, as well as 2 new arrests, bringing the total number in police custody to 8. All men, as authorities work furiously to unravel what they describe as a wider terror network responsible for the attack at the arena. The investigation crossing some at least two countries, the United Kingdom, as well as Libya. In Libya, a local militia arrested the 20-year-old brother of the alleged bomber. They say that he had links to ISIS, was also planning a further attack. That information from the militia has yet to be corroborated, though, by Libyan authorities. Meanwhile, back here in the UK, growing anger among British officials about leaks they say are coming from the United States, the latest of which from the New York Times published a series of photos, crime scene photos taken of the detonator, the battery of the bomb, as well as shrapnel, as well as a piece of the backpack. British authorities saying these kind of leaks, they say, coming from the United States, compromising the investigation. British media reporting that Prime Minister Theresa May plans to talk to President Trump about this at the NATO summit in Brussels today.
Aaron, thank you.
All right, let's go ahead and bring in Paul Cruikshank. He's the CNN terrorism analyst and co-author of Agent Storm, My Life Inside Al-Qaeda. He's at our London bureau this morning. Paul, good morning. Thanks for joining us. You know, we're seeing authorities round up more and more terror suspects. What do you think that tells us? And does this indeed mean that there's a terror ring right there in Manchester?
It means that they are attempting to dismantle this network. They believe that there were potentially co-conspirators involved here. They are concerned that the bomb maker may still be at large. So this is a very aggressive, fast-paced investigation using the entire apparatus of British security services to try to understand this threat and to try to work quickly before anybody else in this network has the chance to launch more attacks. There's also a significant international dimension to this because of the travel of Abedi to Libya in the 3 or 4 weeks before the attack. The British are also trying to understand what he was trying to do in Libya, who he might have met in Libya. It's not clear at this point exactly why he went to Libya, but family friends telling CNN that it was actually the father who wanted to get him out of a sort of troubling situation related to gangs in Manchester and to get him out of the country, to get him over to Libya. And then he sort of made up a pretext to his family about going to a pilgrimage in Saudi Arabia to get back to the UK. So not clear whether he went to Libya to get any sort of terror training or anything like that. A lot of unknowns at this point.
The relative sophistication, though, of this bomb, does that suggest to you a much wider network and perhaps an ISIS link?
Possibly, and Abedi was somebody who flunked out of university, didn't have any technical or chemistry background, and so difficult to believe that he could have had the sort of skill set necessary to build what looks like a relatively sort of sophisticated device, at least not a crude device. So that they are very concerned that there could be a bomb maker at large, but it's not impossible that he could have got some training at a certain point in order to make a device like this. I don't think we should rule that out completely, because I can tell you that British investigators have not ruled out the possibility that he indeed managed to build a bomb. And we've seen in past cases lone bomb makers who haven't had that international training managing to put together some pretty sophisticated or pretty powerful devices. We saw that in New York City in September of last year with the devices planted in the Chelsea neighborhood. Those were very powerful, high explosive devices, and the suspect in that case, who's now going to be put on trial, isn't thought to have gone and got training overseas in that case. So a lot of questions still unanswered. But things are progressing at a very high rate from the investigatory point of view, focusing first of all on people suspected to be radical associates of Abedi, and then sort of moving out and trying to map out the entire network, looking at associates of associates and so on and so forth, as is classically the case in these investigations.
Paul, very quickly, got to ask you about these leaks that are becoming a huge frustration for investigators. Where are these leaks specifically coming from?
Well, the British are clearly pointing the finger at the United States law enforcement agencies. That is not clear at this point whether that was indeed actually the case. I've read the New York Times article on the devices, all those images, and they don't say where their source, which country their source comes from. But what is clear is this is causing a lot of heartache in the transatlantic intelligence sharing relationship right now. There are multiple reports in British media this morning that the police in Manchester have suspended sharing information with their US counterparts. That doesn't mean that all UK agencies have suspended that cooperation, but it is, if it's true, we haven't confirmed it at CNN, a notable kind of breakdown in the relationship, because that intelligence sharing is absolutely vital across the Atlantic, and without it, the United Kingdom really would be much less able to understand the international scope of the threat, given the sheer capacity of US counterterrorism agencies right across the Middle East and beyond.
That's some big news if true. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Paul. All right, we'll be right back.